Proudest moment of my life when I learned my dad was a dumpster diver. All right, let's talk about it. This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates talk about all things real estate. Hey Sherry, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Sorry for the hesitation. It's not that I forgot my name. I was wondering why you would call your dad such a terrible thing.
Well, it wasn't a terrible thing.
No, okay, it sounds
No,
not
I'll
great.
circle back to that in a little bit, but yeah, yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about the market. Anything exciting happening this week?
Um, n- uh,
Gotcha, tongue-tied.
uh-huh. Yeah, I'm still hung up on the dumpster diver. Yeah, just normal August real estate market, a little quiet, although I understand that everybody's sitting on a bunch of business waiting to launch it after Labor Day, you and I included. And so yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah,
It's supposed to be slow and it's not actually slow.
no, I mean it's still slower than the spring, but not as slow as it can be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
maybe we'll touch on it in another podcast. But this week, a HOA not carrying enough insurance kind of has blown up a transaction that we were
Yeah.
in. Uh,
Yeah.
so it was interesting. Just kind of the highlights on that was the lender wanted to make sure that there was 100% replacement, even if the building was only partially burned down. So let's say the
Mhm.
building was 60% burned down, but 40 of
Mhm.
it can be saved.
Yeah.
Um, the insurance company was only going to pay to rebuild the 60%.
Yeah.
But the lender said, oh no, if there's a law that says it has to be rebuilt, we want to make sure that
Mhm.
that's covered. So kind of got stuck right there and we're shopping that one around.
And not just the lender. The lender doesn't necessarily make those rules. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac make those rules,
Yep.
and they are the ones who insure the loans, and they are the only ones, mostly the only ones right now, who are buying mortgages after the 2008 meltdown.
Yeah.
And so, whatever they say, they make the. Oh, you know what I always say? The people with the money make the rules. Well, those are the people who have the money, and they make the rules. So
Yeah.
just follow them. But I think we found a solution to that problem because that's what we do.
That's right. Together with the buyer's agent and the buyer, we've done some work there. All
Yes.
right, back to my dad, the dumpster diver. So, we back in like the 80s, I think, he worked with a an organization, which I'm going to introduce in a sec,
Mhm.
that rehabbed houses in Oakland. And so part of how they saved on expenses is my dad was a scavenger and would go to these big construction sites where they would be throwing away three-quarter sheets of plywood. So he would
Wow.
jump into the dumpster and pull out two by fours and plywood and all sorts of other parts that then would go and rehab houses in Oakland.
Mm.
So he was a dumpster diver in the best sense of the word, scavenger, and he did that for an organization called Habitat for Humanity. And I want to introduce our guest now, Patti Wang Cross, who is with Habitat for Humanity East Bay, Silicon Valley. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you so much, Adam and Sherry. It's great here.
Yeah, we're excited. So, for those of you who don't know about Habitat, I'm going to let Patty tell most of the story, but part of my introduction is Habitat works on low-income housing, and it's not just here in the Bay Area, but it's all across the country and actually international. And I have a little history that my brother worked for Habitat for Humanity International in Latin America. So he was in Nicaragua, Ecuador, and Costa Rica before going to their international headquarters. But what's great about Habitat is that this local affiliate where Patty works does work right here in our community. So, Patty, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Habitat, and then we'll learn more about what you guys do.
Sure. So I actually got involved with Habitat for Humanity for the first time right out of college. I had graduated directly into the dot-com bust back in 2002, graduated from Berkeley, and so didn't find a job right away, right out of school like I expected to. And I'm not good at sitting around doing nothing. And so while I applied for work, I also looked around for something new to try and some way to occupy my time in a way that felt productive.
Mhm.
And I had full disclosure, never done a lick of construction in my entire life. I'm not sure if I'd ever even lifted a hammer at that point at age 22. But I decided to take a chance. We were building this affiliate, Habitat East Bay Silicon Valley, was building up in Crockett, which is just this side of the Carquinez Bridge. And I decided to try my hand at construction for the first time. I went out on I believe it was a Wednesday morning at 8:30, and had a great day. I was met really warmly with a lot of gratitude, and I had a day that was filled with a lot of meaning. And even though 23 years later, I still will say I'm not too great at construction. It's still my favorite place to be. I've done
Yeah.
all sorts of things for Habitat over the years, but there's nothing quite like being out there hands-on and being on site with fellow volunteers. And I would say the most impactful part of that early experience was that on that very first day in 2002, I worked alongside a future homeowner at that site named Valerie. She and her husband, John, have 3 children. They were younger at the time, I want to say preteen, early teen years. And today that same homeowner is, I believe, 6 years away from paying off her mortgage in full.
Wow, that's amazing. What a great story.
It was incredible. And the fact is, as I remember painting that day, and Valerie and I were painting together, and she mentioned that they had moved, more times than the number of years in the last, 4 or 5 years, just because they were chasing affordability, and the rent prices were so unstable. She and her husband were both working full time, and even on 2 full-time incomes were unable to, afford the rent in the area, let alone have the opportunity to put away the savings you would need to purchase a home on the open market. And to know that that family has gone from that situation where they were moving, every few months really for a time, to
Yeah.
now being just a handful of years away from paying off their mortgage is incredible. And I know their 3 kids are now grown, but they still live in the area. They have little grandkids that come and play in the same bedrooms that their parents grew up in. And so, yeah, it's incredible to have been a part of that and had that experience from my very first day on site, and to know that 23 years later, I feel like I can tell some version of that story for family after family, home after home, because I've had the chance to get to know so many Habitat homeowners and clients over the years.
Yeah, well, that's such a great story. I know you're going to get into the sweat equity part of it a little bit later, but so I volunteered a couple times at project sites, and I think that one of the things that's kind of amazing is the staff for Habitat and the volunteer professionals, not just volunteers like myself. Habitat makes it so easy to show up with just your hands, maybe gloves. You can borrow gloves, borrow a hard hat for safety purposes, but they make it so easy to do the low skill things, and then the things that need a little bit of skill, they'll bring you up to speed. So it's just who knew that just a regular person could go and help build a house?
Yeah, absolutely. And we answer that question all the time. Do I need experience? Do I need tools? And no, none of the above. You need to be 16 or older to be on our construction sites, but you don't have to come with tools. You might want to bring a bag lunch, probably some sunblock, sturdy shoes,
Yeah,
clothes you don't mind getting a little dirty because you will be doing construction. But other than that, any skills you need, any tools you need, we're here for you.
yeah. Well, so thanks for sharing that part of your story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Habitat's mission, and then a little bit about how you go about achieving it?
Sure, absolutely. So, it's no secret, especially here in the Bay Area, we're really at the epicenter of the housing crisis in our state. But the housing crisis is something, I go to Washington every year. I go to Sacramento and hear from people from all over the country and the state. And the conversation around affordable housing has only become more prevalent because it's a crisis, not just affordability in general, but home ownership in particular. It's a crisis that isn't any longer just a coastal state problem, an urban area problem. It's hitting communities of all stripes and all sizes and all over the map. And so it's something that I'm hearing a lot of conversation about. And so here in the Bay Area, you don't have to tell anybody we're in the middle of a housing crisis. But most people that are working in the housing space are addressing affordable rentals, are addressing for emergency housing, transitional housing, all of which are extremely needed and extremely important. There aren't a lot of folks working specifically in the homeownership space. And so
Mhm.
that's really part of what makes Habitat's model unique, right? We are here to make sure more people that don't traditionally get access to the opportunity of homeownership on the open market get that opportunity through Habitat for Humanity. It's a really unique model. Adam, you mentioned sweat equity. That's a partnership through which the future homeowners that are selected for our program are actually out with us, putting in hundreds of hours on the construction site, in our restores, you name it. They're actually helping physically to help move our mission forward. And so that's a really important part of that model. And a lot of people don't realize our home ownership program doesn't give houses away for free. That's a popular misconception when people hear about Habitat for Humanity, that we're building houses and giving them away. That is definitely not the case. We are selling these homes. Habitat homeowners are paying a mortgage. They're simply paying a mortgage that's affordable for their household. And so we are pricing their homes in a way that ensures they're not paying more than about 35% of their monthly income for their housing costs. That's not just their mortgage. That also includes taxes and insurance. That includes utilities. That includes a reserve for home maintenance. That includes their homeowner association dues. We want to be sure all those costs to stay housed are less than about a third of their monthly income. And if you think about what that means, so many people here in the Bay Area are what's considered housing cost or rent burdened. They're paying over a third, sometimes over half, or sometimes even upwards of 2/3 of their income just to remain housed. And if you think of how little room that leaves in your budget for extracurriculars, for transportation, let alone weathering an emergency, and to say nothing of being able to put something away for the future and invest in your family's future or lay down generational wealth. That's out of reach for the vast majority of people here in the Bay Area. So a big part of what we do at Habitat is make that opportunity available to more people through affordable mortgages. And then a lot of people don't realize we also do home preservation. So we work with current limited income homeowners. These are often older adults that may have purchased their homes decades ago when prices were more affordable. And they're at the point where they have deferred maintenance or critical health and safety dangers in their home that they're not able to afford to address. So we're there to help out with those home repairs. And we also help prepare more people for the opportunity of homeownership and other financial goals in their lives, even if that's just bringing down their debt, fixing their credit, what have you, whatever that financial goal is. We have a whole HUD-approved housing and financial counseling program to help people toward those goals.
I don't think I knew about that last part. That's really interesting. Um, we sometimes hear the term BMR, below market rate. Would you describe the Habitat that in that same category?
Definitely.
And is that something that monitoring that the 35% ratio, is that something within Habitat, or is that a government agency looking over your shoulder? How is that governed?
That's part of the Habitat model. So when we are looking at all our cost imbalances, that's something that we keep at the forefront, is ensuring that housing cost remains below that 35% benchmark.
You probably have more applicants to participate than you have homes available. I'm just curious about, how does a potential client for Habitat find out about it? I mean, we know about one project that's right around the corner from where Sherry lives, Esperanza Plaza. I can't think. I keep forgetting
Esperanza Place. Close.
Yeah.
Esperanza Place.
Yeah, which I volunteered at. That's one of the places.
Thank you for that.
I've worked at. Yeah. So that I'm sure that all those units have been accounted for, because I know that they have to work on their own units and where it is in a cycle. But how do you find
they're
clients?
Building more, aren't they? I mean, I drive past it.
Oh, is there a new phase?
And I think they've started another phase back there.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Sherry. So it's a 42 townhome development in total, of which we've completed the first 23. So yes, those first 23, the applicants have already been through the process. They've already completed their sweat equity hours, and they have moved into their homes, which is exciting to see, because, I remember breaking ground on that development. And then now to see, when I walk through there, I see family cats in the windows and wind chimes hanging in the doorways, and kids playing basketball.
Kids playing basketball. Yes.
So it's an incredible change. You drove by it yesterday?
I noticed yesterday that the basketball court had been set up, and that there were kids out playing, which was a really nice thing to see. I mean, I'm curious how you get to the point where you identify a piece of land and say, I mean, can you walk us through that process from start to finish? Like,
sure.
where the land, and where do you go from there?
Project development team that can really go into detail, but I can tell you basically, land obviously is a scarce resource. We are often looking at opportunities to develop infill lots.
Mhm.
So that's underutilized land that's already in the middle, of a community, of a neighborhood. And so the 42 homes we're building in Walnut Creek are a perfect example of that. I believe long ago that plot of land was a public swimming pool for a while,
Oh,
and then it's just been
interesting.
vacant for a very long time.
Well,
It's
it
right
sits
there,
right
basically
under
in
the
the
BART
shadow of Pleasant
tracks.
Hip Park. Yep, it's right there. I
Yeah,
will tell you, we
which
have very well sound rated windows. So you'd be surprised. You hear the BART go overhead when you're outside, but when you go inside, you barely even notice it.
when
Um,
I'm about 2 blocks away, maybe 3 blocks at the most, and I mean, I'm not
mhm.
under the tracks. It veers off and goes the other direction from my house, but I can hear it, all day and all night as long as it runs, but you get used to it. And
Yeah.
that land probably had no value for a regular single family home because nobody would want to invest in, a home that's under a BART track. But it's
That
a
that
great
happens
little,
pretty frequently where we can take the opportunity to build on land that may not be attractive to a traditional for-profit
right,
developer. So
right.
that's definitely the case with a lot. And as I mentioned, we've built 23 on that plot so far. We have 19 more to go. So we actually are still selecting for that site because there are still 19 homes to fill. So those will get under construction later this year, so we can finish up that neighborhood. But the way people get involved, if they're interested in being a Habitat homeowner, definitely start with our website. We have the full application guidelines there. But basically, the way the process works is we have a buyer ready list. So we take applications all the time,
Mhm.
whether or not we're actively selecting for particular homes at that moment. It does so happen that we're selecting for 3 different sites across our service area now, but even when that's not actively happening, we're still processing applications. So we can vet those applications and then add anyone that's kind of qualified for the program as a whole onto what we call the buyer ready list. And then when we do have homes available to select for, then we can reach out to that list first and foremost and let them know there's an opportunity to update whatever documents for their application that they need to update, and then put their hat in the ring for those homes. And
Mm,
generally, what we're looking for, the general criteria on which we're evaluating these applications, we're looking for need for housing. Unfortunately, here in the Bay Area, you don't need to look far to find
Right.
conditions like overcrowding, unstable conditions, or simply, like I said, those people that are paying over half and upwards of that just to stay housed. So we definitely look at those elements that constitute a real need for housing. We are also looking for that willingness to partner. So that's that hundreds of hours of sweat equity that they're actually going to put in on the construction site volunteering with us. It's a huge commitment, and we want to be sure folks that sign up for our program are ready for that partnership element. And then lastly, we also want to make sure they have the ability to pay. So we are the broad range of our program. We serve households that earn between very low, low, and moderate incomes. And so that comes out to 30 to 50% being very low AMI, low being 50 to 80, and then 80 to 120 being moderate. That's kind of the broad scope of our service population. But within that, the projects that we're building may have more specific requirements. But that's kind of the broad band of it.
Mm.
And we want to ensure that they're not only income qualified per those guidelines, but we will do a full financial history review because we also want to be sure that in addition to being income qualified, they are in a position to sustainably afford that mortgage. We want to be
mhm.
sure they're in a good position for that. The last thing we want to do is, put a homeowner in a situation where they cannot afford that mortgage.
Yeah.
And that's part of where our housing and financial counseling program came in. It was a need that we recognized about 10 years back that, there may be people that are income qualified that need some help with their credit, need some help with that debt to income ratio, whatever that factor is. There are some folks that could just use a little bit of skill building guidance to get their financial wellness in a place where they then can afford that mortgage. And
Mm.
I can't even count on two hands the number of homeowners I can think of off the top of my head that I've gotten to know over the years that have indeed applied for the first time, were income qualified but couldn't pass that ability to pay review, went through a housing and financial counseling program, sat down with a housing counselor one-on-one, built a savings plan, built a budget, reapplied, and were accepted the second time around.
Mm.
Oh, that's so great.
What a wonderful thing to have to be able to do for people.
Mhm.
So is Habitat funding those loans, or do you have an outside vendor that helps with that? Is it all in-house, or how does that work?
So we actually have a CDFI called Habitat Community Capital that is originating our mortgages. So that's, gosh, I think that we started that CDFI, I want to say in about 2013. It's
Wow.
yeah, I might have that year wrong,
Yeah.
but we recognize that need for a lender that is used to working with an affordable housing developer, and so we have folks in house that have started that Habitat Community Capital, and they not only help us out with originating our mortgages, we've actually worked with other Habitat affiliates around the state to help with theirs, with originating mortgages, with construction loans, with all sorts of financial products that are tailored to the affordable home building sector.
So well, that brings me to kind of the next question, which is about Habitat's funding in general. So, over the years, on and off, my wife and I have supported Habitat financially. My brother loves to brag about the Restore as a wild success. So, I'll come back to that in a sec. But I noticed that on the banner at the place that we were just talking about, not only was there, I think, Wells Fargo on the banner as a contributor, but some friends and clients of ours, Bob and Barb Frick, were on it. And I know them to be incredibly generous people. Not only are they past clients, but I go to church with them. Um, Bob is a unique guy in the
He
sense
sure is.
he is very fully invested, not just with money, but with, I mean, literally puts his body on the line. And one of the things that he has championed is a Cycle for Hope, a fundraiser. Do you know some of his history there? Can you tell with our audience a little bit about kind of the
Oh,
evolution
I
of
do.
it?
I know Bob and Barb well. I'm lucky enough to know them both well, and they have been very long time supporters. And gosh, it was years ago when Bob was challenged by a student to ride his bike. I want to say that he was challenged to ride it 500 miles, and he said, "I'll do you one better. I'll ride coast to coast.
Yeah.
I'll start with my back tire in the Pacific and end with my front tire in the Atlantic." And
Oh,
I believe he was 70 when he did that first ride. He was raising awareness and funds for Habitat for Humanity on that ride. And he did that a couple of times with Barb driving the SAG vehicle along the way. And
wow.
then back in 2018, he approached us. Barb was like, "It's time to stop doing that. You
Well,
don't need to
you're
keep
almost
riding across
80.
the country. I
Yeah.
know. Let's give that a rest. Let's maybe pass the baton on that effort," which he was only too eager to do. So he approached us back in 2018 about turning that concept into a mass movement literally, I suppose, and make it a charity ride and have people sign up and ride to support Habitat, which is exactly what we did. So we did our first year in 2018, and we're about to do our 8th year in a row, hosting in Dublin on October 19th. Our presenting sponsor is Patelco Credit Union, and so they also have provided the venue for us, which is a fantastic spot right in the Tri-Valley. So it has great access to a lot of beautiful cycling trails in the area. We like to say there's something for everyone, right? So we've got a closed circuit little kids ride for our littlest athletes, 10 and under, right there at the venue. And then we have a 13-mile ride for those more beginner cyclists, novice cyclists. We have a 33-mile for more of a moderate challenge. And then we have a 66-mile metric century plus
Yeah.
that really takes you through some good hills and some gorgeous views. And that's for, our more elite cyclists. But, whatever people's cycling skill level, there's a way to sign on and get involved. And we also need volunteers. We want people to come out and be spectators and cheer our athletes on. So it really is a fun day out in the community. It was a fantastic brainchild of Bob's years ago, and it's really turned into a community favorite.
Well, I've been shamed by Bob because he's been trying to get me to sign up for that, and I recruited somebody to do the metric century, and I said I just don't think I could do it, so I need to still sign up even though he's doing the metric century without me. I got to put my name on the bottom line for that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure you'll hear from Bob if you don't.
I'm sure I do. Especially since I told him about we're recording this podcast, I'm sure he will call me and say you said it, I heard it. So.
He's a very hard man to say no to. I don't recommend even trying.
Well, I think what's great about him, and I'm sure he'd be embarrassed for me to talk too much about it, but we've already given the indication that he just gets fully invested and incredibly generous, has wisdom about how getting other people involved. So, what a great
Really
ally
does.
for you all. Um, so so your funding comes from all those different sources. I assume that you have people that support monthly and maybe even out of the states. Um, we'll put in the show notes who people might want to reach out to if they want to contribute in some way that way. But I also want to talk about we mentioned this at the top of the hour about actually volunteering with sweat labor because I think that you told your story about it, and I've volunteered a couple times over the years. With my own, I had only one negative experience, and it had nothing to do with habitat. But my company, Sherry and I's brokerage, had a work day, and I had signed up to volunteer, and I went to the gym to swim that morning, and I forgot my water bottle, so I was going home for water, and I thought I'm gonna go get coffee instead. And before I got my coffee, I had a heart attack. And so I wasn't able to show up that day, but I recovered, obviously. And I volunteered with my church like 2 months later. So I showed up, but it just took me a little while to get there. That being said, showing up is half the battle, and it can be a lot of fun. I got to use a nail gun, and for those of you who haven't had a chance to use a nail gun, it feels very powerful without being violent.
Mhm.
There's painting, there's insulation, there's all sorts of different stuff. I mean, there on any given day, whatever the project is, there's a team lead that shares with all the volunteers how to do it. Super easy. You do not have to have a heart attack to do it. And
Please don't,
so, yeah,
actually.
yeah, right. So, you said there's three active projects. Where are those projects, and how would people find out about how to sign up to come and volunteer if their church or company isn't doing it?
Sure, sure. So yes, of course, Esperanza Place in Walnut Creek, right by Pleasant Hill BART. We aren't actively volunteering out there right now, but should be again in the coming months. We're just in between phases, and we're lining up all the funding that we need to kick off phase two and finish off that neighborhood. We are also building in Hayward. We're building 10 new affordable homes in Hayward, and so that is well underway. And there's lots of volunteerism happening there. I believe we are just up to rooftops, so there's some exciting stuff happening. And speaking of rooftops, not everybody loves being on a roof. And I always like to say there's lots to learn, lots of different things you can do on a site, but we always say it's a no pressure site. So if
Yep.
anybody doesn't want to get onto that scaffolding, isn't comfortable getting on that rooftop, prefers something ground level, or isn't comfortable using power tools, all of that is perfectly fine. We are always there to meet you at your level. And so I say rooftops, but not that's not for every volunteer, and that is totally fine. And then we are also finishing up a renovation of a 4-unit building down in San Jose. And that's a really unique development in that it's a historic building. I believe it's built in 1910. So it's a historic building down in San Jose. It's a Wolf and Mackenzie, very sort of classic San Jose architecture. And this was a 4-unit apartment building that was slated for demolition. And the Preservation Action Council down in San Jose lobbied to save it. They really wanted to find a way to save this beautiful building. And the way we made that happen was they came to us. We worked together to fundraise what we would need to actually lift that building up and cart it very slowly down the street about 3 blocks to a city donated lot of land and plop it down there. And we have been renovating it for sale as 4 condo units ever since.
Wow.
So we're in the end stages there. And we're actually still selecting for future homeowners at that development as well.
Wow.
So Hayward, San Jose, and Walnut Creek, we have home ownership opportunities in all 3 cities. And like I said, we also just take applications on a rolling basis so that we can keep that buyer ready list full.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Moving a building. I mean, I've seen it like after it's happened. Did you get to see while they were moving it? Like,
Oh, I did.
what was that like? Like they just put it on 2 big rigs and. Well,
Yeah, there were trucks involved. I mean, for weeks beforehand, I think they were preparing by putting all this blocking underneath and reinforcing the bottom. I don't know all the technical aspects. I just know it moved an inch at a time. I
wow.
remember you could walk faster than the building was going. It took
Wow.
all morning.
And we talk about houses moving in our vernacular, but nothing like that.
That's not what you mean,
That's
probably.
not what we mean.
That's
Yeah.
close.
Talk about moving inventory.
I have a question. We kind of skipped something with Patti that we went from you looking for a job and volunteering while you looked for something to now you work with Habitat. You're employed by, I assume. How did that happen?
That happened because I volunteered on the construction site 3 to 4 days a week for about 6 months. So I started in June of 2002, right out of school, and then got my first job out of school in advertising in at the end of 2002. And so then I switched to being a Saturday regular. I was still out every Saturday on
Mhm.
site. And then after a while, I loved my job. It was very sort of intellectually interesting, but not necessarily very personally fulfilling.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I was spending every single Saturday doing something that I found incredibly fulfilling. And it just so happened that I heard through the grapevine that they were looking for a development and marketing associate. And my degree was, my work experience was in advertising and marketing. And I thought, this was the perfect opportunity to combine those two parts of my life, my skill set, something that felt intellectually exciting and professionally exciting, but also something that made me feel good about going to work every day. And, so I joined the affiliate as a staff member back in 2004. So, gosh, I guess it's been 21 years now. And I mean, there's a reason I'm a lifer. There's a reason I consider this my life's work. And I'm our communications manager. And so the great privilege of that, among all of the interesting work I get to do, is that I get to be the person that largely tells the story of our mission and the story
Mhm.
of our work. And a big part of that is that I'm often the person that goes out and sits down with Habitat clients and homeowners and learns their stories and gets trusted to tell their stories to the world. And so, like I said, that first homeowner I worked alongside, Valerie, there have been hundreds of people that I've gotten to know since then through my work, and it's been incredible.
That is tremendously rewarding. I mean, we feel rewarded when we help people get into a house, but it's oftentimes well within their means, and it's just a matter of picking which one. So I can only
Mhm.
imagine adding a layer in there that it's not just that they're getting it to pick their house, but they're getting a house at all. So
At all, yeah. Sounds like a dream
You
job.
know what that makes me think of, Adam, is I actually last year was sitting down with a family that just paid off their mortgage in full. They're down in El Viso, which is part of right there in the middle of San Jose. And this family has three daughters, one of whom actually is on the leadership team across the bay at our sister affiliate across the bay, Habitat Greater San Francisco.
okay.
But one, the youngest of their three daughters actually has moved to Florida, and she is a real estate agent.
Oh,
And she said, because the experience of going from a place where, they were moving from place to place, always in overcrowded conditions, they were a family of five living in a converted garage, wherever they could find, some sense of affordability and stability for that time. She was old enough at move in to remember that, and then to live in a home that, for 30 plus years that her parents have now paid off in full. She was telling me that she understands at such a visceral level how important homeownership is and what that means. And so she said, in my professional life, I don't care if I have to show somebody 50 houses. I want them to love the place where they land because I know what that means. I know what that meant to the five people in my family. And, she's really proud of the fact that she gets to be a steward of that opportunity for other people.
our tagline at the end, and I forced it on Sherry. She didn't get a voice. This is my quote will be when we get there is Dorothy was right. There's no place like home, and there's just something about when somebody gets the keys to their house that they get to be metaphorically the king and queen of their own kingdom. You can paint the walls whatever color you want. You can hang things on the wall without being anxious about how am I going to fill that when the landlord finds out about it.
Yep.
Um, all the ways that give us freedom mentally and from our soul rather than just the financial freedom of it. Homeownership is just there's nothing like it.
Well,
I
and we had a similar experience a couple years ago. We had a young couple that wanted to buy a home and they really couldn't afford anything. The only thing they eventually could afford was going to be a mobile home, but they didn't even have the down payment for that, or the credit scores, or the really understanding of how the process worked. And we worked with them for a couple years, helping them get their credit in line, helping them understand how to save money to be able to afford, I mean, this down payment. And Adam and I saw a lot of different price ranges of homes and everything. Is it fun to cash the commission checks for the $3 million, $4 million sales? Absolutely. But
Sure.
one of the best days that we had was the day we handed over keys to this young couple that bought a $151,000 mobile home.
Mhm.
Well,
And
their tears told the story, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
yeah.
the sheer joy.
Oh, it was amazing.
Um, well, we really have appreciated your time today. Before we completely sign off, I wanted to circle back to the Restore because I teased it, but we
Mhm.
didn't talk it out. We refer clients to Restore all the time. Restore is a habitat run. I don't want to say a I don't know how to characterize it because not only do they resell, donated goods, but there's also new building material.
Let's let Patty tell us about
Yeah,
it.
why am I talking about? Pat,
Yeah.
can you tell us
Yeah.
about Restore?
Hello.
And there's one in Concord, which is in our market. I
Mhm.
think there's one in Oakland. They're scattered throughout the Bay.
Yep. So our affiliate has three. You're right. The one in Concord, which actually we only just recently moved to that location. It's a beautiful location. And then we have one in Oakland and one down in San Jose at the Environmental Innovation Center. And I describe them as donation-based home improvement outlets. And so
Oh,
whether
perfect.
that's, like you said, home building materials, that can be lighting, it can be fixtures, it can be appliances, furniture, paint, you name it. You can likely find it at the Restore. And so yeah, we get a lot of folks that are on one end or the other, folks that are moving into a new place and are looking to furnish it affordably will come shop at the Restore. And lots of folks that are, either moving or remodeling their place and want a place to donate something pre-loved but still perfectly usable, will often use Restore as a resource. So we do pickups, you can drop off. We accept lots of different donated items. And also there's volunteerism opportunities at the Restore as well. A lot of people think of the construction site when they think of volunteering for Habitat, but construction may not be for everybody. And so we have opportunities at the Restore, in our offices. We also have two workshops, full wood shops that support our Playhouse program, which is a program through which we curate team building experiences, often for faith congregations, for corporations that are looking for a team building experience for their members. They can come do a day with us, sponsor a team building day with us, and build a little child-sized playhouse that gets donated to organizations in the community that benefit families and children. And then their sponsorship, of course, supports Habitat's work. And so we need volunteers in those two workshops to keep that program up and running. And so if there is a will, there's likely a way that we can use time and talent from folks.
Mm.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I like to say Habitat is a very big tent kind of organization,
Mhm.
right? So, like I said, volunteerism, if you have time to give and you have a talent to share, or you want to learn a skill, volunteering with Habitat in any of those various ways is a fantastic way to do it. And also giving. Of course, you mentioned Bob and Barb, who are incredibly committed supporters and have been for many years. There are folks that support us at that level, but there are also those folks that send in, $20 a month, and it's easy to think that's a drop in the bucket, but the magic of Habitat is that there are hundreds and thousands of drops in that bucket, and it's everybody pulling together to make this mission happen. And that $20 a month, I can't tell you how much that means when it comes to sustaining an operation like ours. And also corporations that give, whether that's through, sponsoring team building experiences, sponsoring events, just making corporate donations, employee giving programs, gift matching programs. There are even some organizations out there that will match match employees' volunteer hours with the donation to
Mm.
match those hours. And so there are lots of ways you can get organizations, whether that's a faith organization, a civic organization, your company involved. And also advocacy is a big way that we make this work move. Before we put shovels in the ground, long before, we need good public policy in place that makes it possible for us to keep building. And so, I believe you did a recent episode on the finalized California state budget. That's something that we, do a lot of advocacy around. Unfortunately, this year, There is one state program that provides funding for the production of affordable ownership housing. It's called Cal Home, and it was zeroed out in this year's budget. And so that's something that we're definitely advocating hard and asking people to contact their representatives to let them know that they're behind more affordable ownership opportunities, so that more people can, get into that space where they can then start laying down generational wealth and start
Mm.
building on that solid foundation of homeownership.
Mm.
And also, of course, at the federal level, there's lots of advocacy to be done, whether that's, the cut in funding to AmeriCorps. You likely, Adam, know that when you work on our construction sites, you're often having your crew led by an AmeriCorps service member.
Yep.
And that funding is significantly under threat, as well as a lot of the funding for programs that Habitat relies on the federal level. And so we are always looking for people to raise their voices and let their leaders know that they care about the programs that we rely on.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. Habitat's committed to that everybody deserves a decent house, and we're thankful for your being with us today to help spread that message. If you are interested in supporting or volunteering, we'll put all the contact information in the show notes, or you can go directly to the Habitat East Bay, Silicon Valley. What does that website look like? What's
it? It is habatateBSV.org. So as
right.
in East Bay, Silicon Valley.
Yeah, we'll put that in the notes so you don't have to remember it. Sherry, any final thoughts?
No, I just think this is one of the best podcasts we've done ever. So thank you, Patti.
Absolutely. And now
Thank
I'll
you
use.
so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And now I'll officially use the sign off. Dorothy was right. There's no place like home. Bye, everybody.